When God says, "I'm about to shock you with my favor," He's not speaking about a gentle blessing wrapped in comfort. He's talking about a disruption, a divine interruption that unsettles what you thought was stable. God's favor doesn't always arrive wrapped in serenity. Sometimes it comes as a storm. We expect favor to be smooth, but God's favor is often transformative, not tranquil. It shakes us not to destroy us, but to awaken us. Because before God can bless you, He must first awaken the parts of you that have gone numb under the weight of routine, fear, or disappointment. The shock is necessary because complacency cannot coexist with calling. Many people pray for breakthrough, but few are ready for what it truly requires. Favor from God isn't a reward for comfort. It's an invitation to change. When divine favor comes, it often exposes what is small within you. It stretches your faith, it reorders your priorities, and it demands that you step beyond what is safe. The shock is not punishment. It is proof that heaven has noticed you. God does not waste His favor on indifference. He gives it to those who are ready to be undone in order to be remade. Think about the great figures of faith: Abraham, Joseph, Moses, Mary, Paul. Every one of them was shocked by what God's favor demanded. It didn't come in the form of comfort. It came as a calling. Abram was told to leave everything familiar. Joseph was thrown into a pit before he ever sat in a palace. Mary was chosen to bear something she could not explain. Favor didn't shield them from disruption. It invited them into it. Why? Because divine purpose always carries within it a degree of divine discomfort. You cannot become who you were meant to be and remain who you were. When God's favor finds you, it will not knock politely. It will burst through the walls of your limitation. It will challenge the voice in your head that says you're not enough, that says the timing isn't right, that says it's too late. Favor from God does not ask for your permission. It demands your participation. The shock comes because favor reveals what's possible when you align your will with His. It breaks the illusion of control and invites you into the rhythm of trust. You see, the real shock of divine favor isn't the external blessing. It's the internal transformation. The moment you realize that everything that once limited you no longer defines you, that's when you understand the true meaning of favor. It's the awareness that you are being guided by a force greater than your failures, greater than your fears, greater than the sum of your past. And this awareness is unsettling because it calls you to live differently, to think higher, to act braver, to believe deeper. When God shocks you with His favor, He's not merely changing your situation. He's changing you so you can carry what He's about to give. If He gave it before you were ready, it would crush you. But when He shocks you, when He rearranges your world, it's a signal that preparation has ended and manifestation has begun. The discomfort you feel is the evidence that heaven is reorganizing your life. So if your world is shaking, if the ground beneath you feels uncertain, don't assume you've been forsaken. It may be that God is fulfilling His promise in a way you never expected. Divine favor rarely looks like what we imagine. It's often disguised as disruption. But when the dust settles, when you look back, you realize the shock wasn't to harm you, it was to position you. God's favor doesn't just bless, it builds. It constructs within you the capacity to live as someone chosen, someone trusted, someone destined. And that, right there, life is an endless dance between order and chaos. One moment you stand firm, confident, sure of your direction, and the next, everything you built seems to tremble beneath your feet. It's in that tension, that fragile space between what you understand and what you can't yet grasp, that God often speaks. His voice rarely comes to those sitting in perfect order. It comes when the structures of your certainty begin to crack. Because faith is not built in predictability, it's forged in mystery. When God calls, He usually calls you away from the familiar into the wilderness of becoming. When you sense that divine whisper, it rarely sounds like a suggestion. It's more like a summons, a pull on your soul that says, "There's more to you than this." But answering that call means walking into places you can't control. And that's the point. Favor from God does not thrive in your comfort zone. It blooms in the soil of obedience. You must be willing to step into the unknown. Not because you understand everything, because you trust the one who does. There's something profound about how God works with both chaos and order. Order gives you structure, principles, discipline, wisdom. But too much order can turn into rigidity, a prison of repetition where growth suffocates. Chaos, on the other hand, feels wild and uncontrollable. But within it lies infinite potential. It's where creation begins. In the very first words of Scripture, the world was formless and void, chaos, and God spoke light into it. That's what divine favor does. It speaks into your chaos and commands life to emerge. So when everything in your world feels unstable, you might be closer to God's voice than you think. Because in chaos, you listen differently. You stop relying on what you already know and start searching for what you've never heard before. You become open, and openness is the soil where divine instruction grows. The greatest transformations of your life often begin not when things are clear, but when they're confusing, when God interrupts the pattern and asks you to follow Him into uncertainty. When He calls you into something new, it's not to destroy your order, but to expand it. Think of every major shift in your life. Each one carried both loss and revelation. You had to let something go to make room for something greater. That's what obedience feels like. God says, "Step out," and your old identity begins to tremble. Not because you're weak, because He's breaking the limits of who you thought you were. Chaos isn't your enemy, it's the raw material of transformation. But that's where most people hesitate. They want God's favor, but not the journey that reveals it. They pray for purpose, but resist the uncertainty that purpose requires. Yet, that's exactly where faith is tested and proven. God's favor will not fit neatly into your schedule or your plans. It arrives when you least expect it and asks for what you thought you couldn't give. You can't domesticate divine purpose. You can only respond to it with trust. So when life unravels, when the old structure begins to collapse, maybe it's not punishment. Maybe it's permission to step into a version of yourself that's larger, wiser, braver. When God speaks into your chaos, He's not saying you've failed. He's saying, I'm building something new here. Every divine calling starts with a disruption. He takes what's familiar and turns it inside out until you can no longer depend on what once worked. And it's in that unfamiliar terrain that you begin to discover who you really are. The voice of God doesn't compete with the noise of your routine. It emerges from the silence that follows surrender. When you finally let go of your need to control everything, His direction becomes unmistakably clear. You start to realize that chaos and order are not opposites. They are partners in your growth. God uses both to shape you. The chaos humbles you, the order strengthens you. The calling unites them. So if you find yourself standing between what was and what will be, don't run from it. Stand still and listen. That uncertainty you feel is sacred ground. It's where God's favor is taking shape, quietly, powerfully, invisibly. You're not being lost, you're being led. And when you dare to follow that voice, you'll discover that the chaos you feared was never meant to break you. It was meant to introduce you to your purpose. We often ask for God's favor as if it's something we can simply receive on demand. Favor doesn't rest where there's no preparation. God's blessings require structure. The same way rain requires soil to produce growth. You can pray for abundance all day, but if your life isn't positioned to hold it, it will slip right through your hands. That's why favor comes after readiness. It's not that God delays His blessing, it's that He waits until you've built the foundation strong enough to sustain it. You don't pour new wine into old wineskins, not because the wine is bad, but because the structure can't contain it. Divine favor is not a random act of kindness, it's an alignment of character, discipline, and faith. God's favor lands where responsibility already lives. If you want heaven to trust you with more, you must show that you can steward what you already have. Many people want to skip that part. They want the miracle, but not the maturity, the promise, but not the process. But there's no shortcut to spiritual strength. God will not build something eternal on unstable ground. Before He expands your territory, He fortifies your foundation. Preparation is not glamorous. It's quiet, hidden, and often lonely. It's the unseen work of refining your habits, your thoughts, your emotions, and your priorities. When no one is watching, God is watching. He's looking to see if your actions match your prayers. You can't pray for promotion and live with indiscipline. You can't ask for influence while avoiding integrity. The discipline of readiness is proof of faith. It shows that you believe favor is coming enough to prepare for it before you see it. Think of Noah. He built an ark long before the rain came. Imagine how absurd that must have looked, constructing something enormous without evidence of why it was needed. Yet that's exactly what readiness looks like in the eyes of faith. It's not about waiting for proof, It's about preparing for promise. God doesn't bless intention, He blesses preparation. When the time comes, those who have prepared will look like they were lucky. But luck is simply the meeting point between readiness and divine timing. Favor has weight to it. It demands responsibility. You cannot carry God's blessing casually. The same blessing that elevates one person can crush another who isn't ready. That's why the waiting season is sacred. It's where God strengthens your character to carry what's coming. Every delay is shaping you into someone who can handle the shock of His favor without losing your grounding. Because favor isn't just about receiving, it's about maintaining. What good is open opportunity if your inner world collapses under it? Readiness is built through obedience in small things. It's in how you treat people when you think it doesn't matter. It's in how you handle your resources, your words, your time. It's in how you carry yourself when no one is applauding. Every act of quiet discipline builds spiritual muscle. You learn to move with intention, to speak with integrity, to work as if God Himself were evaluating every effort. Because He is. And when that becomes your standard, favor no longer intimidates you. You don't chase it, you attract it. Sometimes God withholds the blessing not as punishment, but as protection. He knows what your character can sustain and what it can't. A blessing that arrives too soon becomes a burden when your inner life is disciplined. When your values, emotions, and faith are in order, His favor arrives like a seal of trust. God says, "No, you can handle what I've been preparing for you." So if you're in a season of preparation, don't despise it. This is the sacred workshop of destiny. It's where unseen faith becomes visible strength. When you are ready, favor won't need to find you. It will recognize you, because divine favor looks for structure, and when it finds a disciplined, surrendered soul, it doesn't hesitate. It moves. That's the moment heaven and earth align, and what you once waited for begins to unfold, not by accident, by readiness. Faith is not blind optimism, nor is it passive waiting for something magical to happen. True faith is courageous participation in what God is unfolding. It's a deliberate choice to move forward even when your logic can't find the path. Faith demands courage, not the absence of fear, but the decision to walk through it. When God's favor is about to appear, He doesn't just hand you the promise, He asks you to take steps toward it. Every step becomes an act of agreement between your heart and heaven. Faith is not pretending everything is fine, it's believing that even if it isn't, God still is. It's not about denying pain or uncertainty, it's about refusing to let them define you. Every act of faith is a rebellion against despair, a defiant statement that says, "I will not be ruled by fear, because I trust something greater." When you choose faith, you step out of the illusion of control and into divine partnership. That's where favor begins to move, where heaven meets human courage. People often pray for God to move mountains, but forget that faith first asks you to move your feet. You can't wait for certainty before you act, because faith and certainty can't coexist. If you're waiting to have it all figured out before you begin, you'll never start. God doesn't give you full explanations. He gives you enough light for the next step. Faith is walking with that light, trusting it will be enough to guide you to the next. And when you do, you discover that the impossible isn't so much a wall as it is a door disguised by fear. Look at every story of divine favor in Scripture. Abraham leaving his homeland, Peter stepping onto water, David facing Goliath, Esther approaching the king. In each moment, faith looked foolish until it worked. That's the nature of divine courage. It will often make you look unreasonable before it makes you unstoppable. God's favor operates on a different logic. It rewards obedience, not comfort. The people who experience His greatest favor are not always the most qualified or confident, but the most willing to risk obedience in suffering. Has a way of breaking open the parts of us that comfort could never reach. It refines, it purifies, and it strips away illusions we didn't even know we had. When you ask God for favor, you often imagine joy, expansion, and breakthrough, but rarely do you expect pain to be part of the process. Yet, suffering is not the opposite of favor, it's often the evidence of it. Because God doesn't just bless you with what you want, He prepares you to handle it. And that preparation often comes through pressure. When life begins to shake, when prayers seem unanswered, when everything feels delayed or denied, that's when faith is truly tested. It's easy to believe in God when the sun is shining, but favor is proved in the dark. The path to blessing is rarely straight. It winds through seasons of silence, through the valley of uncertainty, through nights where you can't see your way forward. But in that struggle, something sacred happens. You stop trying to control God, and you start trusting Him. The storm that was meant to destroy you becomes the very environment where your roots grow deeper. Suffering teaches what success never could. It humbles the ego, clarifies priorities, and strengthens endurance. It exposes the fragile foundations built on pride or impatience and invites you to rebuild on truth. When you suffer with faith, your pain becomes productive. You begin to see that delay is not denial, it's development. God is not punishing you, He's preparing you. He's teaching you to depend on Him, to hear His voice more clearly, to walk not by sight but by trust. Every hardship refines your character until you're strong enough to carry the weight of the favor you've been praying for. Joseph didn't go from the pit to the palace overnight. Years of betrayal, imprisonment, and misunderstanding refined him until he could handle authority with wisdom. The suffering was not wasted. It was the workshop of destiny. When God finally elevated him, Joseph didn't use power to seek revenge. He used it to save others. That's what suffering does. It transforms blessing from something you consume into something you give. You can't lead with compassion if you've never walked through pain. You can't carry favor with humility unless you've known loss. In the furnace of hardship, something powerful is forged: perspective. You begin to see that favor isn't about comfort, it's about capacity. God increases your capacity through endurance. He stretches your faith, until it can hold more of His purpose. Every tear, every unanswered prayer, every lonely night is adding depth to your spirit. When you come through it, and you'll discover wisdom and resilience that couldn't be taught any other way. Sometimes the greatest act of faith is simply not quitting, holding on when everything in you wants to let go, choosing to trust even when you can't trace His plan. That's when heaven takes notice, because favor doesn't just find the strong, it finds the faithful, the ones who endure long enough to see that pain was never the end of their story, only the shaping of it. If you're walking through suffering now, remember this: God hasn't forgotten you. The delay is not evidence of absence, it's proof of precision. He's aligning your life, purifying your motives, and strengthening your foundation so that when His favor arrives, it will not overwhelm you, it will fit you. Suffering refines you until your blessing can recognize you. So don't curse the season that's breaking you, bless it. It's teaching you what comfort never could. When you emerge from this refining fire, you won't be fragile, you'll be fortified. And when God finally releases His favor, you'll see why you had to wait, why you had to hurt, why you had to grow. Because the suffering was not to destroy you. It was to make sure that when His favor comes, you'll have the strength to carry it with grace. When God's favor finally manifests, it rarely comes quietly. It changes not only your circumstances, but also the atmosphere around you. Favor is not meant to be hidden. It's meant to be seen not as a symbol of your superiority, but as evidence of God's faithfulness. When divine favor finds you, it doesn't just lift you. It positions you to become a living message. You become the proof that God still moves, still redeems, still restores. And that's the true miracle of favor. It doesn't end with you, it flows through you. When your life begins to reflect the goodness of God, others start to take notice. People who watched you struggle, who saw you fail, who doubted your endurance, they begin to see something different in you. It's not arrogance, it's transformation. You no longer speak from theory, you speak from testimony. You've lived through the breaking, and now you carry the evidence of grace. That's what divine favor does. It turns your private pain into a public declaration that God is real and active in the world. This moment of manifestation carries responsibility. Favor is never for display, it's for impact. When God lifts you, it's so you can lift others. Your blessing becomes a beacon that calls others out of despair, reminding them that if God could do it for you, He can do it for them too. This is how favor multiplies, by being shared. The light that shines from a favored life is not meant to glorify the person, but the one who gave it. You don't exist to be admired, you exist to be a vessel of hope. There's a sacred humility that comes with real favor, because deep down you know what it cost. You remember the nights you almost gave up, the tears that nobody saw, the faith you had to cling to when everything fell apart. So when the blessing comes, you can't take credit for it. You know you didn't earn it. You endured for it. You participated in its unfolding through obedience, patience, and trust. And because you know the cost, you carry the favor with reverence. You handle it carefully, using it to serve rather than to boast. The shock of favor is that it changes how you see the world. You stop envying others because you understand that everyone has their own timing. You stop doubting yourself because you've witnessed what God can do through your life. Gratitude replaces striving, and peace replaces anxiety. You start to move with quiet confidence, knowing that you are not where you are by luck, by divine appointment. That's what it means to live as a beacon. You carry light without needing to prove it, and that light doesn't fade when life challenges you again. True favor isn't fragile, it's resilient. It sustains you through the next storm because it's built on relationship, not circumstance. You begin to understand that favor isn't a one-time event, it's a way of walking with God. It's living with the awareness that every opportunity, every door, every victory is part of something larger than yourself. You stop chasing signs and start embodying them. When your life becomes a vessel of favor, it shifts the people around you. Hope starts to spread. Someone who had lost faith begins to believe again because they saw what God did in you. Someone bound by fear finds courage because your story reminded them of what's possible. That's the ripple effect of divine favor. It awakens hearts, renews vision, and restores faith wherever it goes. So when the blessing arrives, don't shrink from it. Don't apologize for it. But also, don't hoard it. Let it shine through your actions, your generosity, your compassion. Let people see the transformation and know it was God. The favor that shocks you is not meant to end with you. It's meant to echo through every life you touch. Because when God lifts one person, it's never just for that person. It's for everyone watching. You become living proof that divine favor still moves in the world, not as a distant promise, but as a present reality. And when you carry that with humility and boldness, your life itself becomes the message that heaven still visits earth, grace still chooses the willing,